Welcome also from my side. I'm very grateful that the school decided to organize this event. I'm very much looking forward to the debates of the day, which are debates on topics that would fill many more days than we actually have. I have been asked to give you a short introduction into what we plan to do in the 3 sessions of the day. This is not the standard 70-minute keynote address. It is just a short overview of some of the points that we try to cover. The question is this: how can there be order? Order that is an intentionally man-made institutional arrangement for stability, compatibility, sustainability, nonviolent coexistence, in spite of the inherent, perpetual, centrifugal anarchy of capitalist market society, which often, it seems, economically as well as morally incapacitates agents to care for and recognize such order. How can there be order? This is the big question that has inspired the intellectual efforts of Western philosophers, political economists, sociologists over the last 2 centuries, since Kant, Hegel, Tocqueville, Durkheim, Max Weber, Polanyi, Parsons, Hirschman, and beyond, far beyond. It is still an open question, or a question, more precisely, that has been continuously reopened again and again under the impact of newly emerging crises and conflicts that turned out to be unmanageable and irreconcilable within the framework of the existing repertoire of institutional means available. The sense that we are unable, as if suffering from an addiction, that we are unable to force ourselves and others to desist from doing things that we know are going to get us into serious trouble, or the coincidence of the necessary and the impossible, is a very practical founding intuition of social and political theory. One family of answers to this seemingly perennial problem of order relies on the institutions of liberal democracy as the prime institutional means by which capitalist dynamics of conflict and crisis can be tamed, civilized, and embedded. By combining the liberal components of basic rights, the rule of law, and constitutional guarantees with the democratic features of equal political rights, party competition, and representative government, a kind of state capacity can be envisaged that is sufficiently benign to respect rights and liberties, and at the same time sufficiently capable to respond to citizens' demands while managing economic equilibria, so as to organize a robust process of nonviolent, peaceful conflict accommodation and crisis management. Models of the political economy that aspired to meet these standards were those of a social market economy, or the Keynesian welfare state, or the interest intermediation through the formal and informal mechanisms of democratic corporatism, nicknamed in Germany by some authors as Germany Incorporated. Today, another widely shared vision is that in order to accomplish a sustainable synthesis of divergent and conflicting forces, we need to widen the territorial as well as the substantive scope of regulation and other forms of governance, as is the case with European integration or regulatory regimes such as the WTO or a global climate change regime. So creating order by widening the territorial and substantive scope. Most of these visions of social order, particularly those tied to the level of democratic nation states, have largely been rendered obsolete through recent developments. With a low wage share, let me just point to some of the problems. With a low wage share of now close to a quarter of all employees in Germany, up from 16.5% as recently as 1995. With a dramatic widening of the interclass gap in income, wealth, and educational opportunities. With the dictate of flexibility and its consequences in terms of widespread precariousness and socioeconomic insecurity. With the financial sector crisis and subsequent fiscal and budgetary crisis that is now expected to dominate economic and political life in Europe for a decade or more. With the shift of the center of decision-making to supranational and intergovernmental arenas that operate beyond the reach of democratic accountability. With the shrinking of the share of catch-all parties with their supposedly encompassing, though distinctive programmatic outlooks, with the overall deparliamentarization as well as denationalization of policymaking, with the widening gap between what is known to be functionally necessary in the long run and what is politically possible in terms of current preferences of voters, with the politically virtually unmanageable demographic crisis and its budgetary repercussions, and with the growing and increasingly class-biased farewell that citizens bid to institutional politics. With all these phenomena and symptoms, we have reason to be concerned with the old question, how is social order at all possible? The supply of evidence as well as confidence is waning that the democratic state is a promising agent when it comes to the problem of order and its restoration by political means. More specifically, the axiomatic notion that the democratic state is an entity that is simultaneously capable of maintaining legitimacy due to its inclusive and unbiased responsiveness to citizens and achieving effectiveness due to its sovereign steering capacity concerning the poderes fáticos, as well as other states. Both the confidence and the evidence is clearly on the brink of becoming obsolete. That certainly also applies to a supranational entity as the European Union, which in the present institutional shape incorporates the trade-offs between more promised effectiveness, output legitimation, in exchange for less democratic legitimacy, input legitimation. Instead, we see the link between the by the people components and the for the people component of the concept of democratic government being severed. One also has observed the ongoing dissociation between politics without policy and a populist politics without policy and a technocratic, normatively hollowed out policy without politics. While the former often appeals to particularistic identities, values, and popular sentiments, the other presents its mirror image of being exclusively informed by considerations of the functional necessity and feasibility of policies within a given configuration of veto powers, with political parties having lost the capacity, or so it seems, to bridge the widening gap between the two. But all these considerations belong already to the second part of our one-day program. The first part, this morning session, will focus on the motivating forces that bring down various sorts of undemocratic, authoritarian, old regimes. Historical events of basic political change are, whether eventually successful or not, multi-country cascades, bushfires, chains of falling dominoes, as they were in the Southern Europe in the mid-70s, in Latin America in the 80s, in Central and Eastern Europe after 1989, and in much of the MENA region, Middle East and North African region after 2011, as well as originally, of course, in the wave of failed 1848 revolutions and uprisings that swept through what today are no less than 10 European countries. These revolutions commenced with an outburst of Durkheimian collective effervescence, with a widely shared joyful celebration of people regaining their dignity and overcoming the humiliation they had experienced under the old regime. But their medium and long-term fates are clouded in deep uncertainties. The necessity of such breakdown of authoritarian regimes with subsequent transitions to a version of liberal democracy appears far less axiomatic in today's world. We might speak of a loss of linearity. Nothing gravitates in a specific direction. Some old regimes persist and manage to keep themselves in control while orchestrating partial adjustments and concessions, China being an example. Other old regimes manage to re-establish themselves after their breakdown, claiming to be and managing to be seen as the only and therefore indispensable force of order, mostly by military means. Egypt, question mark. Some newly established democracies end up as hybrids, semi-democracies or deficient democracies. Hungary, question mark. And some old regimes do not really look that old, as they have dressed up as a new kind of authoritarianism, Russia, question mark. On the, one that comes without closed borders, without monopolistic parties, without a state-endorsed ideology and ruling party, also without political rights, yet with intense commercial and cultural international exchange. Conventional regime typologies and developmental stage models in political science come under severe challenge in these circumstances. The only thing that seems stable in this sea of contingencies is a generalization that whatever happens under post-authoritarian regimes is shaped by international forces who, through political and economic intervention, assist, guide, manipulate, conditionalize, colonize, or obstruct the pathways that are chosen in a situation when extreme forms of both liberation and anarchy coincide, as they do in places like Libya today. The nature of the emerging new order, be it democratic or otherwise, seems to be largely dependent not upon domestic protagonists of the regime change, but upon the international alliances and hegemonic powers which provide, often impose, a template or roadmap of change. Such international alliances are not democratic in themselves, as so far only states can be democracies, and they tend to value stability more highly than democracy. In the third and final, as it were, forward-looking panel of the day, we'll explore prospects and possibilities for strengthening liberal democracies in ways and through institutional innovations that might, perhaps and hopefully, enable them, together with the civil societies they nurture, to adequately cope with the problem of creating and maintaining a robust kind of social order in the sense specified before. Without anticipating too much, let me conclude with the suggestion that any revitalization of the capacity of liberal democracy to mediate a societal synthesis and order depends upon its capacity to institutionalize liberty, or more precisely, autonomy. In contrast to an emaciated notion of liberty that is being advocated these days by a newcomer to political office in Germany, Liberty is more than the uninhibited choice you can make from a given menu under given preferences. If you take a train ride of a few hours and take the recent book by Axel Honneth, for those of you who read German on board, you'll never fall back into that position. Instead, autonomy has to do with first citizens' role in the shaping of a credible agenda, not just in picking from a given menu, creating a political possibility space that may, in fact, must transcend choices as they are presently at hand. So setting the agenda rather than picking from the menu. And it also has to do, secondly, with the institutional opportunities which challenge and encourage citizens to reconsider and then possibly revise and upgrade their presumably given tastes and preferences according to which they have come to pick items from a supposedly given menu. But as we shall see, that is more easily said than done. I wish all of you and all of us a fruitful day of debate. Thank you very much.